So what's her name, George?
The Dragonlady.
Ahoy!
Yeah, the story behind this Chinese junk that we're on is it's interesting because back in 62, 63, I was in Vietnam, and we would go to Hong Kong for our R&Rs, and I was on a, I would always see all these Chinese junks in the harbor, and I fell in love with them. And while we were actually in Vietnam, it was our job on a minesweeper that I was stationed on to board and search Chinese junks, or any actually sampans, junks, anything. We were always looking for arms and contraband. But anyway, I really fell in love with these Chinese junks, and I got involved in photography back then, and so, you know, I used to shoot a lot of pictures of them whenever I would see one, but I always wanted one. And about I don't know, gosh, it would have been maybe 15 years ago, I was in Hong Kong on a filming assignment that I was hoping to find a Chinese junk while I was there, and I did find one for sale, and spent the day with the guy, and but it turned out that it was bad timing. And so 15 years ago, that was about as close as I came to one, and I kind of laid the idea down for a while. Been very, very busy with life, and with a lot of other issues and things I was dealing with. But a few years ago, I've had this junk now for about 5 years, maybe a little bit longer, but the way I ended up coming by this one was I was actually down in Mexico putting my place back together that I have down there after a couple hurricanes that tore it up pretty well. And the friends that were helping me put it together had all gone home. It was my last day there, and I was sitting on my front porch, and I live in a nice bay there in Mexico, in Yucatan, and I was watching a trimaran that comes by my place twice a day, and I was thinking, you know, for 9 years I ran tours through Mexico, Central America, and for 21 days we'd be out beating our equipment to the pulp, you know, trying to make everybody happy and get home in one safe piece. We did the La Ruta Maya down in Mexico, in Central America. Well, I watched that trimaran go by my place a couple of times, and I thought, why didn't I do a boat thing? And so anyway, I'm sitting on the front porch, and it dawned on me, well, you know what, you have not because you ask not. And I thought, that's it. I forgot to ask God for what I really wanted the most. And I said, so I'm sitting here by myself, and I said one of those prayers that I said, Lord, you know, I'm going to ask you for something specific. I'm asking you for a Chinese junk so I can bring down here to Mexico to work with you. And that was it. Said my amens and packed it up and came back to the United States. And I was actually up in San Luis Obispo. I opened up a photo ad, or it was a Trade Express, I believe. And there was a beautiful Chinese junk in there, and it didn't say for sale, so I called the guy up and I said, I want to know about your Chinese junk. And he said, well, I'm actually looking for somebody to do a timeshare with on this. And I said, well, I've got to talk to you. So I made an appointment to come down and talk to him, and the minute I saw the boat, I fell in love with it, and I took him to lunch and told him the story of how I had just 3 days previous been praying and asking the Lord for a Chinese junk, and I had to have his boat. And he looked at me and he said, I told him what I wanted to do with it. I wanted to work with the youth down in Mexico, and he looked at me and he said, I'm not sure I'm not supposed to just give you this boat. And I said, why do you say that? And he said, well, I'm a backslidden youth pastor. And I said, well, look, I'm not looking for something for nothing. You just give me a good price that I can live with and work with me on it. And it's interesting because when I left to come down to see the boat, my wife had told me, "Don't you dare come home with that boat." And I said, "Honey, don't worry, I'm broke." But I actually realize I'm more dangerous when I'm broke than when I have money, because I believe God for things that He produces. And I'm not talking about just stuff. I'm talking about miracles. Anyway, I don't want to put this in the category of a miracle, but it was pretty amazing because when we parted company that day, he'd already agreed to sell me the boat, and he'd worked out a contract where I'd have it paid for in a year, and I gave him interest only for a whole year. And at the end of that year, I gave him the money for the boat. The following weekend, I brought my wife down to show her, and he realized right then, he said, "Well, this is not a one-legged deal." I said, "What's a one-legged deal?" He said, "Oh, every man wants a boat." He said, "But when the wife comes along, and if she likes it too, it's a two-legged deal. It'll walk." And it was a two-legged deal because my wife fell in love with this boat too. So we've had it for 5 years, and we're actually still in the process of cleaning it up and trying to restore some things, some areas of the boat, and get it ready to take to Mexico. And so here it is 5 years later, and I'm still stuck here in the States with this boat, but I believe in the right time I'm going to be in Mexico with it. And since then, of course, I've stumbled across another one bigger and better, and I may add that to the repertoire here. I'm not sure. We'll see what happens, but I'm pretty amazed because God answered this prayer in 4 days, and I had this boat 4 days after I left Mexico. And those kind of things just don't happen all the time. So I knew God was listening, and obviously I had favor with him. So that's pretty much the story of the boat, how I ended up getting it. And since then, I've had almost everybody that I've ever met, once they learn about the boat, they've all volunteered to go with me. And so we've kind of made some plans to truck this to Texas and sail it from Texas down around the Yucatan, down around Cancun, because my place is actually an hour south of Cancun. And it's just going to be the beginning of another big adventure, because that's all my life has ever been, is one big adventure after another. And kind of feel like an adventure junkie, I guess. But you know, obviously this is something it's not just a good idea, and it's not just a lot of talk. Dealing with cancer for 5 years, and maybe it was a little longer, actually, could have been 7 years, but it seemed like I had an operation every year. They would find an area, when they first opened me up, they found out that I had cancer all over my colon, and so they cut a large portion of my colon out, put me on a colostomy bag for a while, and actually several months later, when I went back in to have the colostomy reversed, which they did do, the nurses stopped me in the hall one day when I was out limping along trying to get back into normal movement and stuff, and she said, "We want to know something." And I said, "What's that?" She said, what is it you do?" She said, "Because we really had to work real hard to get you tore apart inside. You had healed up so fast in 3 months." And she said, "What is it you do?" And I said, "Well, I had a lot of hands laid on me in prayer for the cancer area and where they operated." And at the time, the other thing I did besides drink Coca-Cola and eat steaks, which is my normal lifestyle, and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, I actually started drinking carrot juice with garlic in it. And I said, so between the garlic and the carrot juice and that prayer, that's all I can tell you. And of course I know it's the prayer, the power of God's healing prayer. And but again, each year would go by and there'd be another issue with cancer, and began to find some. They found some down my pelvic area. Then they said it spread to my lymph nodes, and it was just kind of moving around in my body there. And the last operation I had with the last bout I had with it was when they had told me with the cancer in my stomach area, was when they told me that I only had a few months to live. And when they opened me up the following year, the doctor, I had an issue, and he opened me up, and he came into my room looking really disgusted and really down. And I said, "What's the matter, Doc?" And he said, "You're so full of cancer." He said, "I just closed you up." He said, "I really couldn't do anything for you." And I went to see him. I asked him if he would release me early then, because he thought I was going to die and I needed to get home and deal with my business, which was down in Mexico. And so I got home and I didn't have time to deal with the cancer. I was dealing with issues of my business going upside down in Mexico. I was on the fax and doing correspondence and on the telephone the whole time trying to save my operation. And I really didn't think much about the cancer much anymore, because it's been 5 years, but I was sick of it. I was just sick and tired of dealing with it. And I figured if God wanted me home, He's going to be taking me. And in the meantime, I was just trying to get life in order. And but I ended up going back to that doctor a few weeks later, and he was taking the stitches out, and I asked him, I said, "Doc, what is it you did in there?" Because I said, "I feel great." And he said, "You are the strangest guy." He said, "You're the weirdest guy I've ever met." And I know that I got a lot of prayer at church. Everybody I knew was praying for me. I'd wake up at the night, and my wife would have her hand on my back, and it would be like an iron. I'd wake up because of the heat. And I realized God was using her healing touch to, help me. And I began to know at that point God had a purpose for me, but I had no clue. And I wondered if I was going to really die like they said I was. And I was trying to make preparations to have my wife get on her feet and be able to support herself. And I knew that, everything I was up to was too far out there for her. And I was trying to shut down the business in Mexico and get rid of equipment she'd have no idea how to deal with. And all of that was going pretty well. And I was going back and forth to Mexico after a while, and I kept coming back it was a lot of wind on my place right there on the beach. And I had a little sore on my ear here that just never seemed to heal. And I remember going back to my doctor at one point, and I said, I told him about it, and he said, "Hey, I'd love to help you, but you got to go to a specialist for that. That's ear and throat." And so he sent me to another doctor, and the guy sent me to get a CAT scan. And when I came back in, he read the CAT scan, showed me the tumor, and he said, "If we don't get the tumor behind your ear pretty quick here, it's going to penetrate your skull, and you're going to have big problems then." So I agreed to let him do what he needed to do. So we scheduled for an operation where they were going to whack my ear off and go in behind it and deal with that tumor. And I had to wait a few weeks. By the time he got around to it, I was dealing with issues in Mexico, and I was having troubles with my wife. We were kind of just not seeing eye to eye about a lot of stuff, having a lot of fights. The house would be circled every night by coyotes trying to kill our sheep. And I just felt like a lot of attack, a lot of oppression, a lot of stuff coming against us. And I remember the morning that I was due to go in to get this operation. I prayed the night before, and I kept hoping I'd just wake up in the morning and find a pool of something on my pillow and know that God healed me. Because at this point, I kind of got to the point where I wanted a touch from the Lord, so I started asking. Up to this other point, with all this other stuff, I hardly ever asked, because everybody else was asking for me, and God was obviously doing stuff. But at this point, I asked the Lord, "Would you get rid of that in my ear? Would you heal me?" And I don't really like the idea of somebody fiddling around my head anyway. But the morning I woke up, my wife had been sleeping in the other room. The coyotes had the place circled all night. It was pretty. I got up in the middle of the night, have to deal with all that issue. And I got up in the morning, I thought, forget this. I'm going to Mexico. I'll just go down to Mexico and live a happy life. Well, I got to the door, and my wife met me at the door and said, "Are you going in for your operation?" And I said, "I'm not sure if I'm even going to bother." And she said, "Oh, please do, please do." And she said, "I'll be right behind you." And I said, "Look, you haven't got along with me for weeks. Why all of a sudden you care now?" And anyway, she said, "Please promise me you'll go." So I got in the car and went down to the hospital and went to check myself in. And she was actually right along behind me. And I got in there, and the anesthesiologist came in, and he looked at me one time. He said, "Oh my gosh, didn't they tell you?" And I said, "Tell me what?" And he said, we can't administer your anesthesia to you with that beard." He said, "You're going to have to take that off." I said, "I'm out of here. Forget it. I don't have time for this stuff." And he goes, oh, okay, never mind. We'll work around it. So the next thing you know, they wheeling me into the operation room, and you're out. After I just remember how cold the room was. It felt like I was in an ice box. And I remember waking up and hearing a lot of voices. And the doctor comes in and he said, "Well, as soon as you can get dressed and you can stand up on your feet, you can go home." I'm thinking, well, I guess I didn't do anything. I was so in and out. I really didn't pay much attention to what was going on. My wife took me home, and the next day I knew I was supposed to go in, and I knew I couldn't hear anything, and out of that side of my ear. And so the next day, my wife took me back to the doctor, and he kept raving. He said, "I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen anything like this." I said, "Like what? What are you talking about?" I knew my ear. They shaved my head. My ear's hanging half off, and I have a big cup on the side of my head. And I'm thinking, "What are you talking about? You operated on me. Certainly, you must have done something." And the guy goes, "Well, I was trained reading CAT scans." He said, "Obviously, there's a huge tumor on that CAT scan." He said, "We had you open for 5 hours," and he said, "We could not find that tumor." He said, "I started getting so desperate, I was cutting samples out, sending them to the pathology lab, and it kept coming back negative." He said, "So finally I cut a section out and took it to the microscope," and he said, "There's no cancer in you. In that section of where this CAT scan shows there should have been a tumor." And he said, "I've never seen it." I said, "Doc, it's okay." I said, "This is my second miracle. Don't worry about it." I said, "I'll see you later." And we left. I went back to him a few weeks later because I was so bummed that I couldn't hear, and he had me scheduled to come in. I didn't even know what it was all about. And sure enough, that day he reaches in there and pulls out all this cotton. It was so far down in there, I had no idea it was there. All of a sudden I could hear again. So I felt like, whoa, this is not so bad. And by then, of course, my hair started growing, and I had to become a hippie again just to keep my sanity and my dignity, basically, and my vanity. But that situation, that along with the other one, I realized God's in the miracle working business, and He obviously heard my cry to Him. He heard everybody else's cry on the first bunch of stuff. And I don't know why I'm here. I don't know what God's purpose is. But I know I'm very thankful because I've gotten to watch my children grow up. And it's wonderful because I have 5 beautiful daughters, and they're all serving the Lord. And whatever God's purposes are that I get to participate in, I'm very thankful. I have no clue as to what He wants to do with me, other than just let me be who I am. And I usually don't choke up like this, but I love Jesus, and it's amazing to me that people would even reject Him because they have obviously no clue as to what it's all about. And I didn't either for a while. I thought it was all a bunch of fairy tales. I thought it was a bunch of nice stories with good endings. But God has shown me how personal He is, and I've gotten to live like a relationship with Him that's as if He is walking with me right now. I can't express the depth of joy that it's given me, watching my kids grow up and walk and serve the Lord more than I have, and I love the fact that God is so real, and He's available to any one of us if we would just let Him in. And I can't understand why most people won't let Him in, except that they've been hurt by somebody they think is, connected with Christ, that somehow that makes all of it a bunch of bunk. And to me, that's a bad deal. I mean, who wants to spend eternity in hell with all these people that think it was all a bunch of hypocrisy anyway? Well, they're all going to hell without Christ. And, it's like, let your pride down. Let Christ have you. He's got a better plan for your life than you do anyway. And I've learned that the hard way, because I was still kind of headstrong and wanting to go off and do all kinds of things that I had a vision for. And the Lord's had to tame me down a lot. But bottom line is, I'm very thankful that His plans for my life have turned out much better than anything I ever thought I could do with myself. And it's available to everyone. It's available to you just like it's available to me. And I just invite you to give God a chance. You know, I started out by asking Him to prove Himself to me by just praying, seeing if He would show up. And I remember to pray in the name of Jesus because that's where all the power is. And now I know that firsthand. That is where all the power is. And God showed me how real it is and how personalized it can be. And He's never let me down. It's not that I get everything I want kind of a deal. It's not the magic genie you rub his tummy and God's going to give you the new Cadillac or whatever. I mean, who cares about that stuff anyway? That doesn't have to do with your eternal life. Just accoutrements of, you know, this junk is a nice thing for me to have. I'm glad God answered my prayer and I get to have it, but it's got problems. Everything's got problems attached to it. And when you begin to realize you don't need the stuff, it makes it an easier walk anyway. Well, I haven't fully learned all that yet, and so I'm still on a growth curve here. But I find it kind of comical, though, that the Lord has given me everything I've asked for, including the wife I've asked for, and you know, that doesn't mean it's going to come problem-free, but you get to work out a lot of your issues as you make the journey and on your way to heaven. And I'm very thankful that He's given me a little reprieve here to get a few more issues worked out this side of heaven. I always wanted to know if any of this stuff was really real spiritual stuff. I grew up with my grandmother reading me Bible stories, and you know, none of that was offensive to me. I realized I had a good concept of who Christ was just from the Bible stories as a little boy. But I did come to that place where I began to think it all was fairy tales, and I just began to live a pretty robust and full life that didn't include anything to do with God. And the thing is, when I asked the Lord at one point if He was really real to show Himself to me, He obviously did, in ways that were personalized to me. What God did to show Himself to me would be so different than what He would show Himself to you possibly. But the key is, you'll never know unless you ask. And the thing is, you need to ask the Lord, show Himself to you. And whatever you do, whenever you pray, please pray in the name of Jesus, because that's where all the power is. And I guarantee you that if you would just but really ask Christ to come into your life, at some point after He's proved Himself to you, ask Him to come in and clean you. Ask Him to come in and forgive you for your sins. Even though you can't really remember them all, it doesn't matter. God will show you if He needs to, but just ask Him to forgive you. And ask Him to come in and live in your heart. And those are the main ingredients to getting saved. And for every one of us, it's been a little bit different of how we got there. But the bottom line is, don't just experience Jesus and know how great it is without asking Him to come in and seal the deal for you. And that is, get before Him, ask Him to forgive you, and ask Him to come in and live in your heart. It's a great thing to know all about Jesus. A lot of people know who He was, what He did, and won't doubt any of the miracles He did in my life, but they don't make it personalized for themselves. So you need to take the opportunity to ask Christ, not only prove Himself to you, but make Himself real to you, but ask Him to come and forgive you. Ask Him to come and live in your heart. Because I guarantee you, at that point, dynamic things take place that there's no way I can describe to you, but you'll know it took place. You'll know the moment it takes place. And from that point on, you're starting your walk with Christ. It doesn't mean you're all cleaned up and everything's hunky-dory and never have another problem again. You're just beginning your journey. And you're going to have a lot of interesting experiences on the way to heaven. So just get it started. Don't wait. Been patched a long time ago, but they did a good job on it. They did the right thing.
Right. I mean, it'll be here for 100 years.
Yeah. Yeah, they got
58, 68, 78, 80.